Good evening and welcome to the November lecture of the Arizona Archaeological and Historical Society. As you may know, Ark-and-His was founded in 1916 by Byron Cummings, the first archaeologist director of the Arizona State Museum. And since 1935, Ark-and-His has been the publisher of that important regional journal of archaeology and history called the Kiva, or just Kiva. So Ark-and-His is celebrating its 107th year. Two of our principal annual awards are named in honor of these important founders, Cummings and Stoner. We're a group of avocationalists, professionals, and students, and we appreciate all of you for your support and membership. And speaking of membership, Susan reminded me that this is fundraising time for Ark-and-His, just like it is for everybody else in the world. It's been polluting your mailbox and your inbox both. But check your emails. If you're a member, if you're not, please join us as a member. And if not, you can find us on our Ark-and-His website. And if you can, please donate. It helps us a lot in sustaining our programs. My name is Rich Lang. I'm your president for the 2023-24 year. Again, welcome to everybody who's joining us in person by Zoom or finding these lectures eventually via YouTube and on our new website. Tonight, I'll put up the land and history acknowledgement and trust in our abilities to multitask. That is, please read as I cover a few other things here as we get started. A couple of months ago, we returned to in-person lecture opportunities as one of our society's offerings. We are also returning to many of our activities that Ark-and-His has traditionally done. Once again, doing field trips, you'll hear much more about from Susan. We organized a big book sale at the end of October that benefited the Arizona State Museum Library and Archives. And we're busy selling our swag occasionally, like ball caps and t-shirts at regional conferences and other events. I'll turn this over to one of our vice presidents for activities, Susan Beer, to let you know about some of the activities upcoming for Ark-and-His and to introduce tonight's speaker. So Susan, all yours.
Thank you, Rich. Hello and welcome. Two upcoming events we have in December I'd like to showcase briefly are a second field trip to the Murray Springs Clovis Mammoth Kill Site. That will be coming up on Saturday, December 9th from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And it will be led by Friends of the San Pedro docent Dwight Long. Next month's hybrid format lecture will be featuring Matthew Peoples, and he will be covering the risks and rewards of social networks in the ancient Southwest. These are just our two of our December upcoming events. Please check our website for full details on all of our upcoming events. Quickly, again, some Zoom housekeeping notes. Tonight's lecture will be approximately 45 minutes, and then we'll have time for question and answer after the lecture. Since this is a hybrid format, we will be answering questions here from our audience, in which case I'll be walking around with a microphone to get your questions. The microphone ensures that our folks on Zoom can actually hear your questions. Alternatively, you will see Fran pop up on the screen, and she's going to be helping me with fielding the questions from our Zoom participants tonight. So we're going to have a little back and forth on that, and that will be at the end of the lecture. Tonight's talk is titled Rocks and Megaphones, Discoveries of Sounds Coupled with Petroglyphs and Ancestral O'odham Ritual Landscapes, with speaker Janine Hernbrode. Distributed amongst the petroglyphs at three of the largest Ancestral O'odham petroglyph sites in southern Arizona are assemblages of boulders that resonate when struck, producing distinct bell-like sounds. The visual traces of sound making on large bell rocks and adjacent bedrock indicate that they were not only chimed with percussion strikers to resonate with sound, but also were abraded with a grinding motion to produce volumes of sound. Some of the bell rocks investigated also appear to have been roughly shaped or pecked to resemble animal heads, an indication of the boulders being an object accorded animacy and of having voice. Many of these boulders have petroglyphs and use-ware evidence consistent with usage during pre-contact times. Recent investigations of remote smaller petroglyph sites that lack naturally occurring bell rocks have revealed the presence of both bell rock manuports and a ringing striker, A fourth large petroglyph site lacks bell rocks, but is associated with a cache of copper bells on a hillside overlooking the site. These discoveries further illuminate the importance of bell-like sounds in the cultural practice of the Hohokam and suggest that the bells were necessary to complete the landscape characteristics of sacred sites. Janine is a graduate of the University of Arizona and has spent a lifetime in an avocational pursuit of observing, recording, and researching rock art. She's participated in Hiss's Tumamok recording project and has headed up efforts to record additional 71 petroglyph sites in Southern Arizona. She's the leader of the Rock Band, a volunteer rock art recording group, which today consists of 15 people, including 3 archaeologists, 4 photographers, a biologist, a musician, a researcher, and 5 other petroglyph recorders. The Rock Band's recording of the Kokoraki complex has been honored by the Arizona State Historic Preservation Office and nationally by both the Society of American Archaeology and the American Rock Art Research Association. Please welcome our speaker, Janine Hernbrode.
The first thing we're going to talk about this evening are the bell rocks. And the way this is going to go, bell rocks are first, and then I need to give you some background. My work builds upon itself, so we have to have a little bit of background, and then we'll talk about the megaphones. So let's just start with that. I've spent the last 17 years investigating small parts of the same whole at petroglyph sites that are within 35 to 50 miles from Tucson. They're puzzles of imagery and sounds, of artifacts interwoven with the findings of ethnographers and previous investigators. When it comes to repetition of the imagery, the interplay of the landscape features, and the necessity of instruments for sound, the patterns repeat at sites used for ceremonials for millennia. In recording the sites, our mantra has always been, oh, you found something new. Well, one, that's nice. If you find 2, well, that's interesting. But if you find 3, that's a pattern. And when you accumulate 18,000 glyphs and 71 sites, patterns emerge. So this shows some of what we have found over the years. And if you will look above, yes, thank you. Above the words, you see examples in these categories. And this is what I think is going on in the Tucson area. We occupy an ancient landscape along the Santa Cruz River, a landscape that was known to paleo mammoth hunters, to hunter-gatherers we only know and describe as archaic. And you can see a couple of archaic examples here. And then to early agriculturalists who were farming and irrigating 4,100 years ago, much earlier than other people in the American Southwest. And I believe these 2 above early agriculturalists by how dark they are and by the pecking style. are probably early agriculture. And then you get 1,000 years. You see how different these things are? You get 1,000 years of the Hohokam. And eventually, after the Hohokam faded, then the Tohono O'odham. And these on the end, I believe, are Tohono O'odham. Oh, it looks like France right in the middle of it. So I believe that these are the same people, largely the same people through time. The petroglyphs use some of the same techniques, some of the same symbols in the same places in what appears to be the same ways for a very long time. The petroglyphs are strewn across a landscape with boulder exposures of all sizes. And I lead a group of people who also wanted to record rock art. So we formed ourselves into the rock band. And you already heard who we have in the rock band right now. We have worked for the Arizona Archaeological and Historical Society, for the University of Arizona, for Coronado National Forest, the Bureau of Land Management, a private ranch owner, Saguaro National Park, Pima County, and the Arizona State Park System so far. So I've been asking through all of this, how is it that the people live here? And what is the fabric of belief that holds their communities together? And why do we find such patterns inscribed in these places? And after 71 sites, you might ask, okay, so what do the sacred sites have in common? In general, they're a homogeneous pile of boulders without living structures and more practical food processing tools. Those things are absent or very minimal. These people are not living long-term in these sites. And whether the site is a small pile of boulders like the one in the upper left up there, or a medium pile of boulders below it, or like the absolutely stupendous pile of boulders on the right. Can you see those two people down here in the circle? It's clear that you need boulders to have a sacred site, but the size of the boulder pile isn't highest on the list of what matters. So what matters besides the boulders? Well, water matters for both practical and spiritual reasons. Each site has either a present water source or evidence of having had a water source nearby. The cultural tradition of the O'odham dictates that the water cycle begins under the ground. It isn't like the water cycle that you would ask any of us about, where we would tell you, oh yeah, rain falls from the sky and it gathers in rivers and it goes to the ocean and then it evaporates and it comes back around to us. No, for the O'odham people and for many Native Americans, water begins under the ground. And under the ground is a world that exists that not only has the water, but the spirits of the ancestors are there. Now, water in the desert is intermittent, and it's pretty obvious when you come upon water in the desert that it generates life, like the tadpole in the photo and the petroglyph nearby it, right? Over here, you see the tadpole and the tadpole, or the canyon tree frogs and the shell frog imagery. It bespeaks of life beginning in the watery lower world, a tier of the universe that is below the surface of the ground, and like the water, it then emerges into the present world. I can't say that I know what each of the 71 sites was for, but the ones with flat areas large enough to be gathering places, many of them with a scatter of artifacts showing use, those appear to echo the ethnographic accounts of ceremonial sites where a number of villages would gather together. So a suitable place to gather together, boulders and water, are part of the list of things that matter. Another thing that matters in these spiritual places appears to be the sound of bells. Bell rocks came to our attention when we first encountered them at Kokoraki Butte and Ranch, where there are, believe it or not, 130 bell rocks with use wear on them. But I've also made some observations that are common to two other huge petroglyph sites in southern Arizona and small sites in Saguaro National Park and Coronado National Forest, and sites within the county and park and state park systems. The sites in Saguaro National Park, with just a couple of exceptions, have boulders that just don't ring naturally. And even though the park is a heavily visited area, we found portable bell rocks at 3 sites. I think the reason they've been safe from pilfering is that people just haven't recognized what they are. They don't look particularly valuable. So this is an exciting thing to explore, and I would like to share with you what happened when a new person with a PhD in music volunteered for the rock band. So here she is, discovering the properties of a truly wonderful bell rock at Kokoraki Ranch. And she's talking to my husband, Bob, who points out that the depressions in the boulder are significant.
Listen to the different pitches. Oh, wait, Bob. There's a sonic thing going on here that you have to see. No, you do. Look. It's crisscross, same pitch. Look. This is the same as this. This is that.
Wait. What about where those holes are, right out on the end?
Or this?
Those are from
The
heavy,
strikes.
long time use.
Yeah.
And this,
See, they're different pitches.
yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Hold everything.
They are different pitches.
We tried it before and we didn't get the difference.
So the cultural use of ringing or bell rocks is a worldwide practice, but bell rocks are still being discovered. Recently, a Colorado-based archaeologist working in Great Sand Dunes National Park accidentally tapped on an artifact she was investigating in the lab. And the sound was so sweet and startling that the hair on her arm stood up. And then she got to looking at the rest of the elongate stones. Those are the ones that are in the picture on the right. I'm not getting this to work either. Over there. Those are from Colorado. And they are similar to the kiva bells that have been reported by Emily J. Brown in 2014. Brown found use of kiva bells widespread within the Rio Grande Valley and also reported a similar stone from a site in northern Arizona. Ken Hedges' 1993 paper reported the cultural use of ringing or bell rocks is worldwide. And here are a couple of examples, both from Africa, but bell rocks or gongs are found in Korea and China and Vietnam and Mexico and Bolivia, all around the world. Bell rocks are still being discovered mostly because we just are not accustomed to finding them and neglect to test for sound. And Henry Wallace wrote that when he first heard about bell rocks in 1993, he went back to a previously recorded site and found that the only so-called cupules he had recorded were actually strike indentations on bell rocks. In working the sites, we explored the properties of bell rocks, finding that the quality of the sound is influenced by the properties of that thing that you are hitting it with, which we call the striker, and by the skill of the user, by the force of the strike, and by the perch of the boulder on the ground. So here, a rock band member is using a wooden egg as a striker, We use wood in order to hit them. You get a better sound if you hit it with a rock, but that alters the patination that is on the rock, and we don't want to do that. So we have wooden instruments to work with. So she is using this wooden egg so that the strike zone, the patination will not be affected. Shall we try that one and see if it runs? So we've also used a wooden mallet that's softer than the surface of the boulder to ensure that the patination level on the strike zone won't be altered by our use. And this particular assemblage of boulders that ring is at a different site. So striking along the lower edge is a common wear pattern at 2 large sites. And you can see that here. Do you notice that? Here are the petroglyphs. Darn it. Let me see if I can get this to work. Petroglyphs up here, you can see what color they are. And this lower edge, at the time that the petroglyphs were made, this lower edge was how this bell rock was being struck. And then this ceased to be used. And the next people that came along started striking it on this point instead. But that still is not modern use. That still is probably Hohokam use out in here, but there's 1,000 years to work with. So you can see the difference in the patination level. So this person is going to also strike the support boulder so you can hear that the surrounding boulders don't ring. Okay, let's go on to the next one. A portable bell rock found at a site where the rest of the boulders don't ring appears just coincidentally placed on a shelf-like boulders at the site. The use wear is in the form of small pecks randomly spread down the length of the stone, indicating something pointed was probably used as a striker. And this is a small pile of about 40 boulders, only 26 petroglyphs on 6 boulders, but by importing this ringing rock, even though it's not a very melodic one, sound properties have been provided at this site where none existed before. The surrounding boulders might have been used along with the ringing rock, but we didn't find use where to testify to that. The photo on the left is another view of that site, and you can see the small bell rock behind the native tobacco. I'm not very good at pointing this thing. Here, just casually left there. And you can see that the native tobacco grows in the same niche that you would have to stand in order to use this bell rock. So I really believe tobacco and datura also join the list of things that matter. So why do bell rocks ring anyway? I can give you a partial answer. I know what people usually ask me, so I'm going to begin with that. No, it isn't hollow, and no, it doesn't have special crystals. It's physics, actually, so I forgive you for not knowing. When a bell rock is struck, you're setting it in motion. You're sending a sound wave passing through the boulder. So the whole boulder is vibrating. And if you touch it somewhere while it's being struck, you can feel that vibration going through. So, but to me, one of the remarkable things about these boulders is that even boulders that weigh a half a ton or more than 2 tons will vibrate with sound with just the strike of a mallet. My brother, bless him, is a cutting edge engineer who works around here someplace. And he says to facilitate the vibrations, the rock has to be the same composition all the way through, and absent anything like a crack or crystals or a bubble in the middle, or some other aberration that's going to stop and deaden the wave as it goes through the rock. So homogeneity throughout facilitates the movement of that wave. And the musician that you saw in one of the videos has shown us that sometimes the waves can move in different directions, giving you various pitches in the same boulder. So positioning is also necessary. It should touch surrounding boulders as little as possible. Burying it in dirt cancels the sound at approximately the same ratio as the amount buried. It should be suspended as much as possible, and you can enhance the sound by propping it up off of other boulders like this one has been. You see this small rock that's about to give way. This one was lifted up in order to suspend it using that small rock. I don't know how much longer this is going to work, but it at least works for now. And this one appears to have been played from below because you can see the strike zones here and here and here, and a little bit there and a little bit here, even out here on the edge. This particular one is a huge boulder with use wear down the left edge. Down here, you can see it has been struck down here, but the boulder doesn't ring. And I guess you might say, well, look at that big crack. Maybe that has stopped it from ringing. I don't know. It doesn't ring now. But underneath this boulder, in a niche, I accidentally found an artifact. I was climbing up in order to hold a shade so that the photos could be taken of this. And I put my foot into a niche and I moved the artifact. It's a piece of bomb tuff, and it rings. It, I believe, is the striker, and it rings even when nothing else does. So first, I'm going to strike the use wear to show that it doesn't ring up above, although the clack clack may have been also utilized. And this is cell phone video, so the microphone doesn't pick up all the sound. But in this example, it's the striker that rings, and particularly on its ends, so that you are seeing that the wave, if you strike it on the end, the wave has the longest amount of time to travel and you get a better sound. This is the second ringing striker I'm aware of. So no ring on this part. So I had a piece of bomb tuff. I brought it this evening so that you can come ring it if you want to. I got it from a volcanic area in west central Arizona. Bomb tuff, when it's thrown from a volcano, is a gelatinous material, and it falls on the ground and hardens. And it rings really well, but I got too enthusiastic with my experiments and I broke it. And, you know, when I looked at it, I thought, well, that's not a problem. This chunk came off the end and it'll still ring, but it didn't. There was a lot of clunking that was going on. And so I had to investigate further and found several cracks. I think you can see one up there with the blue arrow. And it wouldn't ring anymore. So I glued it back together and found that once again, it rang, but it was like pinging a repaired pot. The voice is just no longer quite the same. Another characteristic of bell rocks is that a number of them, in addition to having strike mark impressions, also have evidence of being abraded, some of them greatly abraded. I consulted Jenny Adams, a groundstone expert, and she suggested an experiment replicating the use wear on non-cultural boulders. My experiment showed that the abrading makes a few decibels more of sound, but the big difference is that it makes continuous sound. There are accounts from ethnographers of the O'odham who have descended from the Hohokam, noting that in the Wikkita ceremony, that has a very loud portion that made one observer withdraw, in his words, to a mile away where he could enjoy the singing more comfortably. And it appears that the Hohokam also may have generated great sounds in their rituals too. And whether the purpose, I don't know, was to drive away evil or signal the populace or provide some special drama for a special story or replicate the roar of thunder or other natural phenomena, or I guess for any other reason, the capabilities of these boulders combined with their positions are impressive. So some of the bell rocks have been used in more modern times. Around the edges of the strike zones, you'll see darker usage marks from pre-contact times. So you see how bright this is. This has been more recently used. It fades and grows yellower as the use wear is from an older period of time. And this use wear is approximately the same as the glyphs. So we find this at more public sites. You can see it well in effect here. This is an older strike zone. This is a newer strike area. This one up here is from a more remote site that has not been so public. And I guess some of these brighter white strike zones could still be cultural use because these were in use as long as the ceremonies took place at these sites. But some could be from modern non-cultural visitors. So if you intend to go out and look for some of these, I hope that you will be careful to preserve the evidence. A bell rock with an uneven surface has a special sound, and I was able to use this non-cultural rock with an uneven surface to test dragging a striker across it, which results in more of a bring sound. That must have made music all the more exciting to the musicians. And there's a light trail from end to end on the bell that's pictured, and it may have been from such use. At 4 smaller petroglyph sites, we found portable bell rocks at places where the natural rocks don't ring. They are small. They ring somewhat less impressively, but they reveal the possibility that this was a necessary sound in Hohokam ritual that was performed at the petroglyph sites. They don't have extensive use wear. Maybe they didn't even need to ring just to be there as a substitute for one of the characteristics that make a site sacred. In fact, bell sounds were apparently so necessary that at a large petroglyph site with more than 3,000 petroglyphs and no bell rocks that we could find, a hidden cache of about 24 precious copper bells, along with an estimated 100,000 beads, was left on an overlooking site. So have you read Mircea Eliade, the Sacred and the Profane? He was working in Eastern Europe in the 1950s, and he was trying to define what it is that made this a sacred site and that not a sacred site. And he said that, let me find it here, that ritual sites are places where the landscape features have breakthrough points where the sacred is revealed to humans, and a place where its innate power can be recognized in these mysterious signs. And so I think these are examples illustrating that the awe-inspiring imperceptible forces that Eliade found in the physical landscape at ritual sites can be influenced by human modification. The presence of these portable bells, be they bell rocks or copper bells, suggests that their import was imperative, either to perform specific rituals or to complete the site characteristics to make the location appropriate. They're a hint that sites lacking some of the necessary characteristics can be enhanced to increase the sacredness of the site. And surely portable and naturally present bell rocks join petroglyphs in making the site sacred. Ethnography for the O'odham mentions that sacred objects include stones that look like a person's animal guardian spirit. These items are said to hold power. You know, bell rocks are fairly rare, and although we don't know specifically how their power was viewed, imagine how special a bell rock would be if its shape also was suggestive of an animal head. These ringing boulders have special voices. They may have been used in both ritual and non-ritual contexts. They may have even been used for entertainment, but they exist in ritual places, and song is the vehicle for autumn ritual. Song makes your crops grow. Song helps cure your ailments. Singing even used to announce that you should come see an enemy scalp. These are indications that the voices of bell rocks were more than just an accompaniment or an entertainment. By the time the early ethnographers visited autumn rituals in the late 18 and early 1900s, rituals took place in churchyards and villages rather than at petroglyph sites with bell rocks. Bell sounds continued though. The drawing is from a 1936 report by Julian Hayden. And the bell was collected in 1909 and it is from the catalog of the American Museum of Natural History. We have found that bell sounds were part of the spiritual life of the Hohokam and certainly are part of the lives of their descendants, the O'odham. The Wickeda, the autumn ceremony that provides for the ongoing well-being of the earth, features both numerous clowns and a cornmeal sprinkler adorned with bells and shell tinklers. So what's the significance of bells? The presence of substitute relocated bells, the imported manufactured bells. This research suggests that the bells, instead of just being costume decoration that has been postulated for many years, bell sounds, whether they're natural or imported, or are more connected to the sacred than we have previously considered. So now let's look at another pattern among the Hohokam imagery. It's a progression from a barbell through a couple of intermediate steps and finally to human beings. So you see the barbell on the left, a barbell, two circles connected by a line. So at large sites, we collected all of how many barbells we had. And then the next category is something that looks like a barbell, but it has extra things connected to it, but not enough extra things that you can think that it's a human being yet. And then the third category is something that anyone would think it was a human being, but the circles, top and bottom, are still connected. And then finally, you get the Hohokam anthropomorph with raised arms and bowed legs that is unconnected, but still is reminiscent of its barbell origins. So let's look at another one. That is one site. This is another one. You see the barbell here on the left is also connected to a crack, which is the way that you get to the lower world. And here, the second category, a barbell that's growing things, but doesn't look like a human being yet. The third category anyone would think that that was a human being, but the circles are still complete. And finally, a human being with open arms and open legs. So from the ethnography, we know that life begins in the lower world. And barbells sometimes appear on the underside of boulders as though they form in the lower world. So at first we just thought the boulders were falling down the mountain. But at one site, there were 3 with images on the underside, like the 2 on the left, and another that was leaning at a low angle. So this is, I hope you can tell that this is the underside of a rock. Someone went to a lot of trouble to put barbells back in this cave. This, again, is the underside of a rock. The one in the middle has a series of, this is not the underside of the rock, but it has a series of barbells. Do you see them? Underneath the Hohokam image on top. And in the fourth one, there's a prominent ledge across it and a color change. So it's reddish down below and blackish up above. There's this prominent ridge. The barbells are down here. I hope you can see those. And then this one is partly emerged. It descends below the prominent ridge, but it is coming out into the present world. Or at least I hope so, because I'm betting on these things. So all of these barbells apparently are slated to become humans, and they appear to form in the lower world, just as the ethnography indicates, and as a friend verbalized to me the same thing. So after development in the lower world, they need to emerge into the present world. The ethnography for the O'odham says that they emerged as a group from a hole in the ground. And the pattern I have found in the landscape and in the rock art is that they appear to emerge from the hole created when a boulder splits into 2 pieces, like these examples. So you see, this was one whole rock. It has a fissure down the middle of it. This one is moved this way. This is moved this way. And there are a few barbells or barbell developments inside here. There are also a row of them outside and a row of developing people above. So on a worldwide basis, caves are considered the best place for you to get to the lower world, but we don't really have caves in this country. And so these features of a rock are the things that have been utilized. So let's focus on the panel now on the right. So over time, we have recorded 3 separate petroglyph sites with the same sound property and some of the same imagery. And this is the first one where in 2011, we noticed a megaphone effect. So in order to have the megaphone effect, you have to speak into this hole. And we will look at this further, but go ahead to the next one. The blue arrow shows you that this is the boulder cluster with that panel. And it's a cluster of boulders above a large area of exposed bedrock. And notice the large wedge-shaped opening right here, facing the drainage where the people might gather down here. Petroglyphs are found on that cluster and down the ridge on the right and over here behind where the people might gather. So if you take a position out of sight of these people in the canyon, you're on the uphill side of that boulder. So the panel that we looked at is on the opposite side of this. And you speak in a normal tone of voice through that opening between the rocks. Your voice exits through that wedge and is projected into the canyon bottom. And this sort of projection is what is referred to as a megaphone. There's also a swirling surround sound effect in the bottom of the canyon. So if you are down here, the sound is non-directional. So this is the eastern side of the boulder cluster. It's not the most convenient side, nor is it the easiest to get to. The whole site has a total of 483 glyphs. More than half of them are on the boulder cluster. More than half of the glyphs on the boulder cluster are on this eastern face. So clearly this is a most important place to be. And the largest panels on this site surround that opening in the center of the photo. Barbells and anthropomorphs total 48% of the imagery flanking the whole, far outpacing other image categories. The sequence of barbell to anthro is represented by 39 elements that fit the pattern out of the 48 elements of barbells and anthropomorphs. So this is the imagery tally divided into a few categories. You can see that the dominant theme illustrated here has to do with barbells and anthropomorph transitions. I cropped the photos and jammed them together so you can see a little better. On both the large east-facing boulders, the zoomorphs, except for snakes, are more peripheral to the central circle, anthropomorph, and barbell imagery. So let's look for zoomorphs. You see, here's one. Here's one. I think this is probably one. And here's one. There are a couple down here. You see how peripheral all that is? That probably means that they were added later. And we will get back to that, so hold on to that idea. And the boldest and brightest of the glyphs, and thus those presumed to have been added last, are of two anthropomorphs with bowed arms and legs, one anthro with bowed arms, one anthro that appears to be kneeling. Who knows where he came from? A barbell with an elaboration that looks like zigzag arms. It's down here. A horned lizard with eyes and three-toed extremities. So the patination suggests that this panel retained its intended meaning and remained anthro and barbell centric for a very long time, adding zoomorphs to the outer edges when they became appropriate before the Hohokam Classic, around 700 to 1100 CE. So another site where we found a megaphone-like effect was this one recorded in 2021, sorry. That other one was 2011. It's what's called a globular cave. And can you see the panels made of black figures on the back wall? I don't know if you can see them or not. Can you see those? All right, well, let's look at them more closely. If you speak inside this cave, the swirl of intersecting sound is very confusing and non-directional. Whispering is the best form of communication. But the interesting thing is, whatever you say in a normal tone of voice can be easily heard down there, where the yellow star is. Whatever you say, even in a normal tone of voice, can be heard on the opposite hillside. So once again, just like the first megaphone, you're not visible, but you can be heard by the people gathered on an opposite hillside. It turns out it's about 140 meters from the cave to the area where the sound can be heard. The end of this canyon is bowl-shaped, and the sound is distributed over it at remarkably similar distances. The cave mouth has a wedge-shaped megaphone-like opening that directs the sound to the opposite hillside. Was this effect discovered and used by the native people? Well, we looked for evidence on the opposite side, but we found none. The thing that leads me to think that they might have been aware of it is the fact we have two other sites, where there's more evidence that megaphone effects have been used. The literature says that the importance of music and acoustics is universal and has led societies to purposely seek out places in the landscape where acoustics provided special experiences and that it would not have gone unnoticed. People also chose to add imagery as part of the act of acknowledging its sacredness. So let's look at the imagery and see if there are barbells and anthropomorphs in the same sort of proportions we saw at the first megaphone site. So some parts of the cave interior were damaged in the past, but this panel and another remain. You can see an area that includes a crack. There's a crack up along here that leaks water. Water into the cave. And that's at the upper right. And notice that some of the images in that area have been overlaid by the precipitates in the water appearing as a white cloud over the pictographs. And I put a circle around it. You can see where the major parts have been, have had water trickling across them. So D-Stretch was very helpful here. D-Stretch is a computer program that enhances color, and it revealed an older faded panel underneath the animals running from left to right. So there's an anthro underneath one of the bighorn sheep and others that are more evident in close-ups. So I blew up this part, he's right here, and there's an anthro underneath him. Can you see it? Here's his head, arms, body. I am not sure if his legs are just overlain. I think maybe that's a leg. There probably is another one there, or possibly over here. There's also an anthro here. Do you see that one? So the anthros look like they're emerging from the crack. Those are in a big red circle over there. Their long torsos are reminiscent of their barbell origins. Also a crack seeping water and thus an indicator of the lower world, accompanied by 6 anthropomorphs that fit the pattern, showing transcendence, seems significant. So once again, here at a different site, we have emergence imagery associated with a structure that enables a megaphone. So on both this panel and the previous one, we've seen animal imagery added after anthropomorphic subject matter, either to the periphery of the panel or over some of the anthropomorphic elements. It was Emil Howry who developed a life form type frequency chart in his analysis of ceramics from Snapetown. And according to Henry Wallace, there were changes in ancestral O'odham material culture and social practice in the late pioneer or early colonial period around 700 to 800 CE that signaled a new ideology and thus changes in rituals. Aaron Wright summarizes those themes as, and this is a mouthful, the Mesoamerican cosmological metastructure. And that entails an importance of animals, color symbolism, ancestor veneration, a tiered cosmos, and other themes evidenced in rock art. And I will say that if we remove the zoomorphs here, we have that same tiered importance of the barbells and anthropomorphs for this panel. So here is the third site. 3 is a pattern. The Tohono O'odham name for this place is something like Shonto. And that's been translated variously as to pound. In fact, an O'odham friend said it's used to describe wielding a hammer or a club. And his thought is that the pounding might be about the Bell Rocks. And, you know, he could be right, but often languages don't translate just perfectly. And I met a researcher of the O'odham language, Harry Winters. And he said it also has nuances that extend the meaning to including breaking something up. So you're not only pounding it, but you're breaking it. And that immediately made me think of something that is on this hill that is broken, this huge broken boulder that is 2/3 of the way up the hill. Now, a niche between those broken boulders forms the background for the Megaphone acoustics at the site. The huge broken boulder must have previously occupied what was the northernmost end of this niche. And the boulder either met with, I don't know, some cataclysmic or even a slow geologic event, or maybe someone was pounding on it. How do we know? And now it lies in pieces. An interesting aspect of this megaphone is that the bell rock you saw being tested earlier is resting in that niche. And everything you say when in this location can be easily heard in what is now the parking area at the ranch, which is what that points to down there. That's 115 meters. And it must have been a suitable place for gathering because there's an artifact scatter there, testifying to it being used for more than just traversing the area. So once again, you can sit in this niche and not be visible to the people gathered below. And since the megaphone still works, even after the boulder was broken, I really wonder what it was like before. And perhaps the swirling surround sound we witnessed at the other sites was possible here too. And here's the imagery at the site of the megaphone. I analyzed 4 large pieces that I could identify as parts of the fractured boulder. And once again, you can see on the left, we have barbell-related petroglyphs here. This time, along with grids, a motif that accompanies transcendence. You remember that transcendence is movement between the layers of the cosmos through access from the present world to the lower world. So each of these 3 sites has co-occurrence of emergent barbell-like imagery at the site of the megaphone. A total of 86 elements are on the 4 boulders, 21 of which are barbells and or anthropomorphs. One of the transitional barbells even has facial features, and grids and ladders that also are related to this transcendence are included in the line elements category up here. Okay. So both of those are associated with transcendence from one layer of the universe to the other. The latter is just regarded as an assist to get you, it simply means that you can climb from one layer of the universe to another. And it easily gets you to this other layer. And the 6 grids, some of them visible on this section, are large with wide lines that are typical of archaic imagery. They figure prominently on the panel. In the deep history of humans, grids are part of the geometric visual percepts that are the first stage of trance. And here, among the symbols for the lower world whose access is through trance, they're appropriate symbols to accompany the barbell to anthropomorph imagery. Now, according to Amadeo Rea, who worked with Piman informants, the autumn origin story is normally told during the 4 nights of the winter solstice when the sun seems to stand still. A poison animal must not hear the storytelling, and yet there are 15 zoomorphs on the panel, 9 of which are snakes. Well, rattlesnakes are a common motif in Hohokam petroglyph sites, where a pattern of 3 lines from the tail commonly shows the rattling sound. And interestingly, the snakes in this panel emerge from cracks and undulate down edges and originate or end at edges or hang from the hand of an anthro whose legs still form a circle here. Here's the snake. Here's the anthro with a circle. None of them have the rattles or the signature 3 lines indicating sound. In fact, none of the 15 zoomorphs are quadrupeds, as we've seen at the other 2 sites. The 9 snakes are joined by images of 5 birds and a bird track. 3 of the birds have what appear to be very flat faces, facing outward rather than being in profile. And that makes some connections too. Ethnographer Ruth Underhill wrote that the great horned owl represents the embodiment of the soul of a deceased relative, and the ancestors take the form of an owl to accompany the dead to the lower world. The combination of the megaphone effects, the emergent images, contributes to the sacredness of these sites and to the longevity and continuity of these beliefs over both time and within an area. 3 sites, 3 megaphones, 3 panels of barbell emergent imagery make 3 examples of this co-occurrence. And this makes another attribute that we've identified that contributes to making a site sacred for the Ancestral O'odham. Megaphone effects join the sound of bells, petroglyphs, water, space to gather, as attributes supporting the belief that this place is where you can transcend the present level of the cosmos and contact the ancestors. These landscapes are considered living, soulful beings by the native people. True not only to hunter-gatherers and early agricultural societies like the literature says, but to these people who are still here, preserving their beliefs and their ways of life. Thank you. I think I have spoken until my voice is hardly here. Thank you.
We are going to take questions now from the audience here, and Fran will also take questions from so would anyone like to start off here with questions?
Oh, I couldn't have answered all of your questions.
Yeah, I've seen a lecture on the flower people in the Hohokam and
The flower world?
in the flower world, yes. And I see a lot of similar petroglyphs at Kokokaraki Butte in the Sutherland Wash area. Are there any bell rocks in the Sutherland Wash area?
No, no bell rocks at Sutherland. It was the one that had the cache of bells and beads.
Was the one megaphone site Sutherland Wash?
One megaphone site is Sutherland Wash, yes. So there was more to that I was going to say, but now I can't remember, so I'm old, sorry. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The O'odham people are not very thrilled about the flower world idea. And I actually had one of their cultural people tell me that if they had the flower world, you would think they would know it. And unfortunately, the anthropologists that named the flower world were looking at a bunch of symbols that they got together and they began calling it the flower world. So if you say it's the flower world to an O'odham person, they don't know what you're talking about. But flowers are important to them for several reasons. So, and that all figures into the flower world. It just isn't called that. Sorry.
I'm interested in the idea of abrading the rocks. You mentioned the abrasion in connection with some rocks that have the appearance of animals, such as a parrot head. Were they shaped that way, or yeah? That's a lot of work.
Some of them you can see that they have taken chunks off the sides by hitting it really hard. There are places that pieces have been removed, so yes. And also the abrading shapes things in some ways. So I think it's, have you ever talked to a woodworker who has a piece of wood with a knot in it and they decide to utilize that in a special way? It's the same thing with the bell rocks. The person who is going to shape it or use it can see that it is something special and begins to utilize it in that way by chunking off part of it or maybe using it as is. Some of them don't look really very altered.
Rock are two distinctly different practices and require a whole lot of hard physical labor.
Hard physical labor. Actually, there's a place up on top of Kokoraki Ranch at the top of the hill where there are some towering boulders up there, and perched on top of some of them is a rock that has to be, at least this big around. So, I don't know, a meter in diameter. And it had to have been lifted up there. That's the only way something like that gets up there. And when we tapped it, it didn't sound very good. And I think they just must have been terribly disappointed. But things have been moved around. These people utilized this, and I don't know how they did it. I think it would take a lot of strength to do what they have done.
Other questions from the audience here? Oh.
When you were discussing the second site, you made some reference to the importance of the winter solstice. Could you elaborate on that a little bit related to the sites you were looking at? I believe you made a reference to that.
To the winter solstice?
The winter solstice in the ceremonies or something.
Okay, so there, so how familiar are you with the movements of the sun on the horizon? You know, in the let's see, I have to get this right. In the summer, okay, so at the pause of the sun, the apparent pause of the sun on the horizon, there are like 4 days when the sun pauses, and that is a very important time for the telling of stories. And those stories can be told about animals at that time. There's a big stretch of time when you're not allowed to not allowed to say those animal stories. But this is a particular time when those stories can be told. And poison animals just are not supposed to hear those stories. And since it's in the winter, then I would assume that most of the things that are going to bite you or poison you are estivating or hibernating someplace. And so it begins to be a little safer to tell those stories. I don't know more about it, but Amadeo Rea, if you look up his books, REA, he wrote very extensively about some of those connections.
Other questions from the audience here? Okay, Fran, I'm going to let you take it away.
I just have a couple of questions. First of all, Janine, is there evidence of musical instruments being used with the megaphones?
Well, there is a bell rock that is in one of the megaphones. It's in a very prominent place. I do think that bell rocks were for music and to accompany music. There is evidence that the O'odham used instruments with their singing. So the idea that this bell rock is located with the megaphone seems like it probably was used there, and probably for singing or for sound of some kind. The other two sites, I did not find a bell rock or an instrument close by, so I don't really know. But many of these things are portable, like this, that you could have taken with you. You know, people seem quite stunned by the idea that rocks can make these noises, but you know yourself, if you have something that is made of all the same material and you drop it on the floor, say you're in the garage, you're going to drop a wrench on the floor, you are not surprised that it's going to ring, right? It's made of the same stuff, it's going to ring. Same thing going on here.
Okay, I had one other question. Do all igneous rocks ring? Let's say if they were suspended, etc., would all igneous rock ring, maybe at different frequencies? That's from another person online.
Well, I haven't tested all igneous rocks. I don't think so. Vesicular basalt rings pretty well, but not all vesicular basalt. And I really think the metamorphic process has been helpful, but I'm not a geologist, and I don't have a geologist as part of the rock band. So if you know somebody, please send them. We could also use a sound engineer. Is that it, Fran?
That's all that we had here, yes.
Thank you all. You are a wonderful and our attentive audience.
Thank you, Janine. Fran, thank you for facilitating our Zoom folks. And thank you all for attending tonight, and have a wonderful rest of your week and happy Thanksgiving. Thank you. Good night.